Good afternoon and welcome to my presentation entitled Auditing Tools and Techniques to Improve Your Workflow. Before we kick off, a little bit about me. I'm Ian Lloyd, otherwise known as Lloydie, and I'm a Senior Accessibility Engineer here at TPGI, and I've been with the company for 3 years. I have been involved with accessibility in one shape or form for over 20 years, but this is my first face-to-face presentation in a very long time. So, it would be a very risky or foolish move for me to start a presentation with a joke, right? Okay, well let's just get this out of the way then, I guess. I didn't say it will be good, and frankly, if you laugh, I might actually be a little bit disappointed. A colleague who loves his puns posted this on an internal chat a little while back. What do you call a magician who has lost his magic? Of course, I knew the answer was Ian. Another colleague then replied, Magic Ian would be a great stage name. I figured, it's been a while since I've been out in front of a crowd, so why the heck not? Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you Magic Ian. I'm showing a badly mocked up Photoshop image of me as a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat with the word Magic Ian or magician behind me in front of a stage with a whole lot more colour than the real stage. Bad jokes aside, I hope that in this session I will be able to conjure up some tips and tricks that you can take away to improve the way that you do your audits, or whatever other processes that you think some of this might apply to. I cannot teach you to Photoshop, as is evident here. I should say, at this point, this is not an accessibility presentation. Well, it's not just about that. There will be some aspects that are only about accessibility issues, but a lot of this could be used in a wider context. Also, apologies in advance if some of this might feel like me teaching you to suck eggs. Some of this will be new to many of you, some of this will be things you already do and have done for a while. Pick from it what you will. What I have noticed is that not all of my colleagues came into this from the same route as me. My route is that I was a front-end developer for many years, and I have been banging on about accessibility in an unofficial manner since around 2001. As a developer, I have used text editors in a way that perhaps some accessibility purists without that background do not, or may not be aware of. There are things that I do, which I take for granted, but having shown these while on calls with colleagues, it has been made clear to me that this is not always common knowledge. So, with that in mind, let's start through this smorgasbord of ideas, tips, and tricks. The structure of this presentation is basically this. Things you can do in the browser, text expansions and shortcuts, batch processing, process or convention ideas, and then finally using hardware to trigger scripts and processes. Part 1. Things you can do in the browser. I said that I hoped I would not be teaching you how to suck eggs, but if there is any egg sucking to happen, this is most likely the section that you will find it in. It would be remiss of me not to mention TPGI's own free browser-based tool, Arc Toolkit. In fact, I'll probably get a slap if I don't. The good news, there's plenty in this tool to shout about without me having to worry about an impending smack around the chops. Toolkit runs a raft of tests to check for WCAG failures, as well as a number of issues that are not WCAG failures, but still affect accessibility. There's lots of good best practice stuff in there. Like any tool that tests for a lot, results can be overwhelming on some sites. Also, remember that no automated test can give you a complete picture or understand nuance. Here we see an example of a scan run against the BBC News website. Even for an established site with a team of dedicated accessibility professionals on board, there are issues to address. As well as the results scans, there are a number of other features that you might not be aware of, including landmarks, tab order, and loads of good ARIA tools. You will find these tucked away in the Highlight section. With the Landmarks tool, landmarks are revealed on the page and labelled. It makes it very easy to check for header, footer areas, navigation, that kind of thing. They are also listed in the right panel of Toolkit with more details about each node. Are you checking for focus order? The tab order tool does two things. It lists the focusable elements in the right panel of toolkits, and it also identifies each focusable area on the page along with the path that you will take through the page. With those two, you should be able to spot any focus order issues. Look for any lines that appear to crisscross other lines. This is a close-up view of the tab order, where you can clearly see the path that a keyboard user will take when navigating through. With a little bit of tweaking, we can use the tab order tool to also reveal 1.3.2 meaningful sequence failures. The JavaScript shown here looks for every element in the body and gives it a tab index of 0. In other words, something that we tell our clients never to do. But hear me out. You run the script and then you run the tab order tool. This won't always work. It depends on how many nodes are in the DOM, and it can get very messy. You can adapt the script. For example, you could get it to select specific tags rather than literally everything. The reason I have done this at times, it can be more obvious than just disabling CSS to remove layout. It's potentially a useful way to demonstrate to a client just how out of sequence things are, as the image on the screen shows. You can see that the reading order is completely all over the place. Disabling CSS would not have had the same visual effect and impact. It is a mess of zigzagging lines that show that the reading order of the content is very, very broken. Incidentally, the file name I saved this image for was 1.3.2 reading order is utterly broken.png. There are some very useful ARIA tools in the ARIA section. Where else? Such as ARIA usage. You can also find live regions on the page, including visually hidden areas that are used just for screen reader users. There are loads more tools to investigate in ARC Toolkit, and I recommend that you take the time to explore what's on offer. But I need to backtrack for a moment to the tab order hack that I showed you earlier. I didn't show you how I ran that script. We are veering back into the teaching you to suck eggs territory here. You can run anything from a simple alert to hundreds of lines of code in DevTools console. Let's start with something simple. This is the script that you saw on a previous slide that makes every element focusable, and all we do is copy that script, we paste it into console, then hit return to run it. Then you can see every element on that page has now been given a tab index of 0, making everything focusable. While running ad hoc scripts in console is useful, you might want some things to always run. This is where live expressions come in. As Gigi mentioned in her presentation earlier, something that is very useful to have as a live expression is document.activeElement. When a page has poor or no focus indicators, or hidden focusable elements, this identifies the element that has focus. It shows the CSS selector for that element. Let's see a quick demo of this. Here I add a new live expression in console by pressing the button that looks like an eye. I type document.activeElement. Then, when tabbing around the current page, the element that has focus is shown in the console by its CSS selector. Sometimes it's not clear from just the CSS selector which element has focus. Like in the previous example where all the focusable elements were links and just showed as A. In this example I add two further live expressions for document.activeElement.outerHTML and document.activeElement.innerHTML, which provides more context and help when tabbing around the page. You can run much larger scripts in console than what I just showed. In the example on screen, there are just over 200 lines of code. I'm not sure if there is a limit to how much script you can run. I've certainly never hit that limit. But if you need to do this often, you can save it as a snippet. Select Sources in DevTools, then select Snippets. Add a snippet, any JavaScript code that you want to run, save it with a name that you understand, then run it any time that you need it. You can see this in action in this video clip where I demonstrate saving a headings diagnosis script as a snippet. With DevTools open, I select Sources. I add a new snippet and name it Headings. Then I copy all of the JavaScript from my text editor and paste it into the snippet. Finally, I trigger this script by selecting the snippet I just created and choosing Run. You can build up a whole library of scripts that you might need to run often. In this video example, I have the heading script that I added a moment ago, but also have a links list script and a focus style script. I can trigger any of these as and when I need them. And because they are saved as snippets, they are available to use on any site. Now we move on to bookmarklets and favorites. If you can run a script in the console, you can also run it from a saved bookmark. These are known as bookmarklets or favorites. The let part is hinting that these are little scripts, but you can actually run a lot of scripts this way. A long time ago, maybe i5, 6 time, there was a character limit that prevented longer scripts. In simple terms, it's JavaScript flattened into one line with some modifications that allow it to be run in a link with href::JavaScript. If you have a profile that syncs bookmarks, then your scripts will sync too, which is very handy. I mentioned earlier that some automated tools can produce an overwhelming amount of data. There is no single tool that gives me all of the information exactly how I prefer it. I tend to use a range of different tools to give me the complete picture. Sometimes, though, I have to create my own because of the way my brain works. In the next section, I'm going to showcase a few of my own hand-rolled bookmarklets. There are plenty more that you may find useful than what I will show today. All of these are available at a11y-tools.com. But how do you create a bookmarklet? I used to do this the hard way, manually. That involved removing all the line breaks, changing quotes so that they don't break things, changing all spaces to an encoded version, %20, but there are tools that automate this and make it very easy. However, you must make sure that you end single lines with a semicolon, otherwise things will break when the code is flattened. Here are some examples of bookmarklets that I have put together because I wanted to craft something that worked for me. The first script suggests autocomplete values, finds all text inputs that don't currently have autocomplete attributes. It dynamically injects a select list under each one. The list has all the autocomplete tokens, but grouped in a way that is hopefully more intuitive. You may not remember the token name, but you know to look for first name. Pick the right value for each, then press the Prep for Screenshot button, and at this point, all of the select lists are removed. Any fields that had autocomplete values applied are highlighted, and all fields that have been changed are logged to the console for easy copy and pasting. Pick the right value for each. Depending on the tool you use for audits, you may be unable to limit a diagnostic scan to specific parts of a page. This tool, Isolator, allows you to isolate any section or component of a page before you run diagnostic tools. This helps to further remove some noise from results that may not be related to the section that you're interested in. Here's an example of the tool in use where I'm selecting a card from the TPGI blog. Some things to be aware of with this tool. It will add some issues. For example, Arc Toolkit might report no landmarks found because we have stripped out some key sections of the page. It may break styles, as some CSS selectors may no longer be targeting correctly. Related content that is not visible by default may also be stripped. For example, if the component opens a dialog, that dialog may have been removed. That said, I use this frequently and it's proven useful many times more than the issues noted above have caused problems. The next example is Outliner. It's dead simple. Use a CSS selector to find elements on the page and give it a colour border. You might want to use it to identify broken HTML patterns and visibly show them. It provides a count of the matched elements and it logs results to the console. This video clip shows an example where we simply want to show all images that have an alt attribute. It puts a green border on all images that have an alt attribute, but of course that does not tell you if it's the correct alt. This is just to demonstrate that the bookmarklet can be used for very quick and simple checks. To check that focus styles have been correctly implemented, you can tab through all the fields to verify. You might do a screen recording to keep a record of this too. This bookmarklet, Focus Styles, provides a quick way to verify a whole page, which you can then screenshot for your records. It loops through all the focusable elements on the page, gets the computed styles, then writes those styles into the element in a style attribute. Just a word of warning, it's not 100% effective, especially if any of those focus styles have animation delays on, but it works in most cases. In this example, we can see that the focus style for each link as we tab through has a green outline. While in this example, we can see all of the focus styles in one go by running the script, which you can then screenshot and save for your records. I already covered tab order with Arc Toolkit, but this is my own version of this type of tool that I created before it was available in Toolkit. A feature that it has which Arc Toolkit does not is the ability to choose the colour of the drawn path. Another feature of mine is that it does not work as reliably as Arc Toolkit, but I still like it. Okay, decrapulation. Maybe this is not a slide title that you might have expected, but trust me, this is a thing. The HTML decrapulator is a tool I built to help myself with audits, and it's free for anyone to use. I use it a lot. Markup these days is often a mess. You often cannot see the wood for the trees. Trying to diagnose and remediate is very difficult when faced with this. And when I say this, I mean this. So here we have a section of Facebook Marketplace. Looking at the elements and dev tools, it's just a wall of div elements with oodles of meaningless class names. Trying to get a sense of the structure is not easy. So we take the HTML of the section that we want to understand better and paste it into the HTML decrapulator. There are numerous options that let you abbreviate or remove attributes. Most of the common ones are very easy to select. You can get a sense of how much you have reduced the markup with the turdometer. Yeah, I really have thought about this stuff. It generates a simplified version of that markup that you can simplify further, like flattening repeated nested divs, that sort of thing. The output this creates helps to get a sense of how the page is built. Compare the before and after. 2,200 lines of markup before and 300 lines after. It's much easier to digest and understand. Let's move on to text expansions and shortcuts. Something that I use a lot in day-to-day work is either text expansions for content or references that I have to use a lot, or text editing techniques that can massively speed up creation of markup samples for remediation purposes. In this section, I'll share some techniques that may help remove some of the repetition and save you time. Keyboard Maestro is my weapon of choice. Note that this is a Mac-only app, but there are Windows equivalents. It does a huge amount of automation type stuff. I usually describe it as being a bit of a Swiss Army knife of apps. There are so many things it can do that it may be overwhelming to begin with. I could bore you for hours about all the things I have used Keyboard Maestro for, but I won't. It's not fair on the next few presenters whose time I'd take up, but it's a Swiss Army knife on steroids. I will cover one thing that I use it for. text expansion. All text expansion applications work on the basis that you have a trigger of some kind, usually a typed string that gets transformed. The trick is coming up with patterns that you cannot accidentally type. I use it for outputting WCAG links in various formats, the URL, Markdown link, open it in the browser, and also for HTML references and ARIA patterns. The video here shows me quickly outputting HTML URLs. So if the format for a link is tag name -L, to create a Markdown link, I replace the L with MD. Keyboard Maestro also has the option to open the link directly in the browser, rather than pasting the URL into whatever document I am in at the time. I have two sets of WCAG shortcuts, one for the success criteria and one for the understanding docs for the success criteria. I use a different trigger format for the WCAG references. The trigger for this is the SC followed by a dash, then either an L for link, MD for Markdown, or I use the double dash to open it in the browser rather than it pasting text. This video shows the text expansion doing three things: inserting the URL for 1.1.1 WCAG page into an HTML anchor element, creating a Markdown link for the same SC, and then creating a Markdown link for the 1.1.1 understanding doc. You don't need Keyboard Maestro to do text expansions on macOS. Text replacements are built into the OS, but it's not the easiest to maintain. Thankfully, I have found a way to make this easier for you. The equivalent of the Keyboard Maestro macros that I demonstrated are available as .plist files on one of my GitHub repos. Download the plist files in that GitHub repository to get the whole collection. Drag and drop is needed for this. It is not keyboard operable. Sorry, this one is out of my control. I'm not sure if this is a method that is officially supported. It feels like a bit of a hack, but let's see it in action. Having downloaded the plist files, drag and drop them into the text replacements panel in macOS system settings. Repeat this for all of the text replacements that you need. The video just shows one collection of text replacements from 4 that are available for WCAG text replacements. So you have seen by adding these, you get text expansion for free in macOS. But there's more. These text replacements also sync with your Apple ID to other devices. Just like that, you have all of these available on other devices with the same Apple ID. In the first video here, you can see all of the text replacements showing in the iOS keyboard system settings. In the second video, you can see the text expansion working in the Humble Notes app. All of this is made possible from dragging those plist files on your Mac. So far, I have shown two methods that get you text expansions for macOS. But what about Windows? Text Expander works for Windows and Mac and has loads of useful features for templating text replacement. It does way more than what I am saying you could use it for. It is a subscription-based service, so it's not free. You will need to create an account with Text Expander first. When you have done that, look for the My Profile link. Then select the Import Export button. You then have to add the CSV files to get your text expansions. But where can you get such files? The good news, I have also ported these shortcuts into CSV format that Text Expander can work with. You might also find other uses for these CSVs other than this app. I'm not demonstrating these in action. You get the idea. It's the same outcome, just a different tool to make it happen. Using text expanders for repetitive things like WCAG references is low-hanging fruit. If you ever have to do QA on others' audits, you probably find yourself repeating certain things. I refer to this article, Heading Off Confusion, When Do Headings Fail WCAG, by David Swallow, a lot in my QA feedback. So if I have to mention it frequently, there's probably a case for a text expansion. Some topics are tricky to explain, and if you've spent a few times writing it out in some detail, it's worth having that to hand. The example here is of people logging failures of 1.4.5, use of colour, in error. In Keyboard Maestro, this is set up using a trigger, and you can then insert plain text, styled text, and all sorts more. In this example, I have set it so that it will spit this text out if I type !QA or I press Control, Option, Shift, Command and Q. Now, if that sounds tricky, the caps lock key on my computer has been mapped so that it triggers Control, Option, Shift and Command. So, for me, it's just caps lock and Q. I lied when I said that it would just spit out the text. I actually have a whole raft of QA comments set with the same triggers. When I use either trigger type, a conflict palette shows up. In other words, Keyboard Maestro doesn't know which one I wanted, so I pick it from there. I continually maintain my responses, updating as needed if I want to add more detail, or if it turns out that my advice was wrong. This can happen. Now we're going to take a look at multi-line text editing. As I have a development background, I am used to working in feature-rich text editors. I have used many over the years, including Notepad, Homesite, Dreamweaver, Visual Studio, Sublime Text, and VS Code. Now, most modern coding environments support multi-line editing, and yet, when putting this presentation together, I did a straw poll of colleagues to find out what editors they use. Collectively, they use almost all of them. What was clear is that more than half were using editors that were not capable of multi-line editing, and many that had the right tools were not aware that this was possible. So what is multi-line editing? Obviously, there is something of a clue in the title. Multi-line editing speeds up creation of new markup samples. Editing existing markup samples also becomes a breeze. In this video, I want to update a number of separate elements in some cards. I highlight the link, then I tell the editor to match all instances of the same text. I can then edit them all in one go, adding some link text and then moving down to the line below to add a paragraph. This can massively speed up the creation of new markup samples or editing existing markup that you want to correct. Before you attempt multi-line editing, run markup through a formatter that you trust first. You can't see what's happening off screen when you're doing multi-line editing, so you need to be sure that the structure is sound, that nesting and indenting is correct. Otherwise, multi-line chaos is very, very possible. Let's move on to batch processing now. This section will be quick, and the reason that it will be quick is because this is not something that is easy to tell you how to do. The tools that you would use will vary. For any batch processing, I use Keyboard Maestro, surprise, surprise. But there are many tools available for Windows and Mac. Macros are typically triggered by hotkeys or watched folders. I'm not going to show you how to create them, but here are a few things that I use it for. Typically, I use batch processing for things like creating folder structures, copying files, renaming files. Now, despite saying that I use Keyboard Maestro for most things, some of you may recognize that the screenshot on this slide is not Keyboard Maestro, but is actually Automator. And while I do use Keyboard Maestro for such things, the tool that I am showing here, which creates a project folder structure, started as an Automator app. And this is an app that I can easily share with you. There is a download link on the slide. I'm not an AppleScript expert at all, but I managed to cobble this together. It's also pretty easy to edit and update to meet your own needs. With this script, you feed a text file containing a list of the components that you plan to audit to the Automator application, as this first video demonstrates. It creates a resources folder on the desktop with a folder for each component, numbered to ensure that the audit is retained. Each component folder has subfolders as defined in the Automator script. Typically, I create this resources folder by copying the table of contents from a test plan, tweaking it as I need, and then I have everything that I need to store all my files in very quick fashion. At the end of a project, I have a process that does almost the opposite of the previous batch process. This script, which I have also saved as an Automator app to share with you, simply removes all empty folders. When I am sure I am done with an audit, I drag my resources folder on here, and any folder that is empty is deleted, leaving just a bare bones structure with the files and folders that I need. You might be wondering why I bother with such rigid folder structuring. Trust me, it's not just about the folders. Wait till you see what I do with my file names. My main concern here is to be consistent. If you always have items named consistently, it opens doors for more automation type things, which I will demonstrate shortly. If folders are always labelled the same, you might be able to run some more interesting scripts against them later, because they are predictable. I will be coming back to this. In this section, Process or Convention Ideas, I will cover a couple of things I do which dovetail nicely with the automation ideas. Even if you don't get carried away with automation, I feel that there is mileage with these. My first advice: if you can, make your screenshots your notes. Some people are prolific note takers. I am a prolific screenshotter. I screenshot and record everything, and these are essentially my prompts for my full write-up, having done an audit. They are, of course, also extremely useful for the client and, ultimately, the developers who need to fix the issues. I document all the issues I find with screenshots, but I also document the things that pass. If things seem broken on later visits, you have proof that it was fine the last time you visited. And it helps stop the self-doubt. How did I miss that? Oh, I didn't. It's been broken since I audited it. So my first tip is that you prefix your screenshots with the SC numbers. Prefixing with SCs can help you spot patterns. This is very useful when trying to summarize findings from a project. It allows you to sort and organize issues quickly in Finder or Windows Explorer. Even without opening a saved screenshot, you will know what issue type it relates to. Use descriptive file names. Save your file names so that they are clearly descriptive of the problem. I save files with spaces, commas, and so on as if I'm writing a sentence. Only certain special characters can cause a problem. The file name should ideally match any annotation text that you add to the image. I even have a macro that lets me pick from commonly used file names and descriptions. It's just a text file that I save and can pull up with a hotkey. It works a bit like a combo box with autocomplete. And this is another Keyboard Maestro solution. Annotate your screenshots. The annotation you use in the screenshot will likely make a great file name. Focus on making the description succinct and easy to make sense of months down the line. So essentially what I do is, I take a screenshot and I annotate it immediately. I copy the annotation text, then I save the file with the SC and the annotation text. I also rename these files as a final batch process at the end of a project, which does things like taking out hyphens, removing some special characters, that kind of thing. Coming back to a project cold is hard, but with this approach, it's much easier to recall what issues there were when you open a folder that is filled with well-named, annotated screenshots that are stored in locations that are predictable and consistent across projects. It's all just right there. No need to navigate through multiple, separate Jira tickets or similar. With all this rigidity, or consistency, with folder and file naming, it provides further options for automation if you are so inclined. So, if I follow my own rules in a project, I will have a folder structure that is consistent and predictable, file names that are prefixed with the SC and named in a way that is clearly descriptive of the issue. Maybe I can do something interesting with this. Because of all that consistency that is baked in, I could create a very simple report really quickly, and in fact I do, routinely at the end of an audit. By interrogating these folders and file names, I can build a file, an HTML file, that does the following. It references the screenshot files and shows them as thumbnails. It allows me to click through to full-size versions, gives me the WCAG details, level, version, URLs, etc. by looking at the screenshot files prefixed SC number and performing a lookup. It creates an easy-to-read title for each issue because the file name was written that way from the start. The screenshot shown here is from one of my generated reports. This is a closer look at one of the reports where I can expand out the WCAG details, giving me URLs, the WCAG level for that SC, and what WCAG version it relates to. Please note, this is not production ready. This is just something I created for me because I could, to help me with recall and to save digging through bug trackers. Consistency was the thing that made this possible. Trigger warning, this final section contains triggers, but don't worry, they are literally just buttons. The only buttons I will be pushing are my own. I suffer from a condition that some producers and musicians refer to as GAS, Gear Acquirement Syndrome, sometimes described as all the gear, no idea. This has side effects of surplus electronic devices littering the house. I do not appear to be addressing this issue. In fact, I appear to have doubled down on it. But these MIDI devices can be used for things other than making music, as I covered in this article on the TPGI blog, MIDI Kit as Accessibility Tools, Music to My Ears. This is a typical example of the type of tool that I find useful for things other than music. It is a Korg Nano Pad. It has 12 rubbery pads that can be assigned to trigger off various macros, once again through Keyboard Maestro, that allows MIDI device notes as triggers. There's even a touchpad that you could use for something. I set this so that it would trigger various browser scripts or manipulate windows, for example, testing text resize, testing reflow, or text spacing. The only problem with this device is remembering which button does what. Now, I did use a Dymo labeler for a while, but then someone left an intriguing comment on that blog post that I wrote. The comment was, interesting ideas, but most of it went over my head as I'm neither a Mac user or musician of any description. I would be interested to see if some enterprising individual could repurpose a Stream Deck or even a number pad to do the same. Stream Deck, you say? So, of course, I bought another device. This is an Elgato Stream Deck. It's really aimed at video producers, streamers, as the name suggests, but it can be put to so many other purposes. Each button can be customized so it's easy to tell what control does what. You can have custom images and backgrounds, and they are easy to label, albeit with limited space. It can also connect with Keyboard Maestro using an app called KM Link, which is a free app in the Stream Deck store. I use it all the time, every single day. It is now my primary method for running browser scripts. In fact, I no longer even compile scripts as bookmarklets. It's integral for any QA that I am doing, setting status of tickets, inserting common responses. Everything is triggered from this control panel. And this is my work setup, a fairly standard mechanical keyboard, a Stream Deck to one side, a Korg NanoPad that I now use to fire off more ad hoc scripts and processes. There's also a mini piano keyboard that I use for, well, actually this one is used for its intended purposes. Sometimes I actually do make music with my musical instruments. I'm not a total monster. So in summary, there is a lot that you can do in the browser beyond the usual extensions. Text expansions can save you heaps of time or repetition. Screenshots are your friend. Consistency in naming opens a world of opportunity, and custom control panels will make you feel a bit like Jean-Luc Picard controlling the Enterprise. Thank you.